Hi, everybody. My name is Travis, and this is the Daily Travesty. What I thought I would do today is start off a series of videos teaching new players how to draft, specifically players that are new to the idea of drafting in Magic. Drafting's a lot of fun. I've been drafting for probably 6 or 7 years at this point, and it's great. I love it, but there is a very high learning curve right at the beginning. Now, you can just sit down, draft some cards, and play some games, and maybe have a bit of fun with it. But you might have tried this already and got a little bit frustrated and noticed that your deck is way worse than your opponent's, or you're having a hard time finding a color combination to go into. You get past really bad cards, and you're getting a little bit frustrated with that. This video series is meant to introduce new draft players to some of the basic concepts around drafting. We're going to be using packs from the new Strixhaven set. I'm not going to be talking a lot about individual card evaluations in this video. Maybe in later videos we'll talk about that, but there is a wealth of resources on the internet already for this. If you're interested in figuring out which cards are rated higher or which cards are likely to perform better in Strixhaven draft, I recommend you check out other podcasts. The Limited Resources podcast / YouTube channel is really good. There's another one called Lords of Limited, which is on YouTube, which is also really good. And there you'll be able to hear about the actual individual cards themselves from Strixhaven. These videos are going to be about drafting in general. We just happen to be using Strixhaven cards because that's what's out right now. So very basic introduction to draft right off the top. Essentially, draft is 8 players. Right now you can see me, Travis, and 7 bots, all sitting around a table together, ideally. And each of us has 3 booster packs with us. We haven't brought a pre-constructed deck. It's not like standard where you build your own deck and sideboard beforehand and come with it. All we have is booster packs. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be opening one at a time. We're each going to open up a pack, look through the cards. We're going to take 1 card out of our first pack and then pass all the rest to the player on our left. So as an example, this is my first booster pack, which I opened. It's pretty standard. It has a rare card. It has 3 uncommon cards. It has 10 commons. And then it also has a mystical archive card because Strixhaven has these special mystical archive cards. That doesn't always happen, but it's something that's added a little bit of interesting stuff to draft. And essentially what I'm going to do to start off is I'm going to pick the card I think is going to be best. Now, I'm going to have other videos about what cards you should go for first or what style of cards you should aim to go for. That is not this video. So I'm just going to pick cards as if I were someone brand new to drafting. So I read through each card. I see this Silver Quill Silencer. That looks pretty cool. I might take this. I read through some more. I see there's an Expel, which is a removal spell, something that can kill a creature. That seems pretty cool. But I go with the card that I think is the most interesting for right now, which I assume is how a lot of people draft, is they just take the rare or they take the most powerful card. Sure, let's do that. So we're going to take 1 card out of this pack, and the other 14 cards are going to get passed around the table to the first player on my left. In this case, it's a bot. And we are going to receive 14 cards from the player on our right. This bot will have done the same thing. They will have opened up our booster pack. They'll take 1 card from it and give us the other 14. So we're actually going to get the cards from this player to look at. So let's go ahead. We'll take our card. We take Silver Quill Silencer. And now you'll see we have 14 cards, 1 less card, that we get to pick from. It looks like the player on our right, the bot that just passed us the cards, this bot here, took the rare out of the pack. I can see that all 3 uncommons are still here. I can see that the mystical archive card is still here, and the rare is missing. So that means the person to my right took the rare. No big deal. I just want to show you the fact that they did actually take something. So what we're going to look at now is a card to put in our deck. We started with this black and white card. I look around, I see that there's a black card that can kill creatures. That seems good. I'm going to take that card. And when I do, the other 13 cards in this pack now are going to go to the bot on our left. And you see we keep passing them around the table. When I do this, the bot is going to get the remaining 13 cards from this pack. They're going to pass what we initially started with to the next player, and so on and so forth. So you see the packs kind of float around the table, and eventually we're actually going to get our initial pack back. It's going to be a couple picks from now, but we're actually going to get the cards we started with back minus 8 cards because every player took one. But anyway, let's go ahead and do this. So we'll take this black spell. We look in here. We have a black spell. We have a black and white spell. Sure, this is a black card. Let's take it. Again, I'm not talking about the individual picks at this point. I'm just describing how draft works. Sure, let's take this card. It's black. This card is white. We're going to make a black and white deck if possible. This card is black and white. This is a black card. Oh, but this is a black and white card. Sure, let's take that. Here's a white card. Here's a white card. Okay. Again, I'm not focusing on the actual picks at this point. It's just the idea that every time we take a card, we're passing everything else to the player on our left and receiving new cards to pick from the player on our right. There's 15 cards in a pack, 8 players at the table. So a couple of the packs we're going to get to see more than once. Okay, we just take some cards. This red card doesn't go into my deck, so it goes into the sideboard. And that is the thing about drafting, is that you didn't show up with a deck. You are literally picking cards out of packs as you go. And anything you pick out of a pack is in your sideboard or your deck. So it doesn't matter if we take some red cards that aren't going to fit in our black-white deck. They still count as being in the sideboard. And that's pretty useful. Sometimes there's reasons to have different stuff in your sideboard. Oftentimes in draft, you'll have too many cards for your deck, and you'll put stuff in the sideboard. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to keep taking cards here. What you'll notice is that we actually just opened up our second pack. And now instead of passing to the left, we actually switch the direction and we pass to the right. So we are now passing the cards to the right, and we're receiving cards from the left. And there's actually little arrows on this program that help us with that. So we take some cards, we take some black and white cards for our black and white deck. And every time we take a card, we pass the rest to the player on our right, who receives everything else. And we take a bunch of black and white cards, black and white cards. Okay, we'll take this colorless card. Black and white, don't need a blue card. Don't need a red card. Don't need a, well, it's a red-white card, it's fine. Okay, we now open up our third pack. And again, we're gonna pass to the left again. So we started out passing to the player on our left, receiving from the player on our right. For the second pack we switched, we passed to the player on the right, receive from the player on the left. Third pack goes the other way, passing to the player on the left again. And yeah, again, we're just gonna take cards, black and white cards. That's all we're worried about taking right now. Again, I'm not evaluating the power of specific cards. This is just the idea of how draft works. So I'm taking all the black and white cards I see, and I imagine that this is how a lot of people that get into drafting start, is they take a card. Oh, we can't play any of these. They take a card in the first pack that they like or they think is powerful. In our case, we took this black-white Silver Quill Silencer, and then they just stick with that. They say, I took a black-white card to start with. I'm going to play black and white this draft. I'm going to take all the black and white cards. And you end up with a deck. Now, that strategy of picking a card at the beginning and sticking to it, that is fine for your first draft or two, but that isn't how you should be drafting when you get more experience with it. And that ends up leading you to a lot of decks that don't play really well, are underpowered. We were actually fortunate enough to get enough black and white cards to make a deck out of, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes if you just try and stick to one color the whole time, or a pair of colors right from the beginning, you actually run out of cards and you realize that there are other players at the table that are also taking black and white cards. In our case, there was actually 2 other people that ended up in black and white. This bot was black and white. This bot was black and white. We were black and white. There was 1, 2, 3 blue-green drafters. There was 1 black-green drafter and only 1 blue-red drafter. So that means that this player got to take any of the red cards they wanted. They had access to more resources and better resources because no one else at the table was taking red cards. There were 3 of us taking white cards, 4 of us taking black cards, 4 taking blue, and 4 taking green. So red was a color that we probably should have been taking. And we actually did see that when we were doing the draft. We were being passed a lot of red cards, including some really good ones, like this Igneous Inspiration or Pigment Storm. So we should have been a little bit more aware of that and probably should have been taking red cards. We didn't do that. We ended up taking a lot of black and white cards. And now what we're going to do is we are going to build a deck out of it. So what you need to do for draft is build a 40 card deck. And you are usually going to have 17 lands in your deck. It varies depending on the type of deck you're playing or even the format itself. Strixhaven versus Kaldheim versus Ravnica versus Zendikar. The type of format you're playing can dictate whether or not sometimes it's better to play more lands or less. In general, though, 17 lands is accepted to be the sort of baseline amount of mana you want. You also tend to want about 17 creatures in your deck. That's the sort of general standard. It could be 15, it could be 19, it could be more, it could be less. In Strixhaven, it tends to be a little bit less because there's some really powerful spells, and the set is built around these Magecraft, Spells Matter, Instance and Sorcery type cards. But as a general rule, about 17 creatures is what you want, because Limited, or Draft, is about creature battles. Unlike Standard or Modern, these different constructed formats where you end up having very efficient, high-powered spells and control and interactions, Limited is ultimately about playing creatures and smashing them into each other. So you want enough creatures to smash into your opponents, essentially. We have 51 cards in our deck right now, and we have to get rid of some. And usually what you'll do is you'll take out the cards that are going to be least impactful first, and just start taking out those ones. So creatures are mostly good. Again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about specific things to leave in or take out. That's not the point of this video. All I want is a deck that has 40 cards in it and about 17 creatures. Now this program is really nice. It actually splits the cards into creatures and non-creature spells. There we go, we've done it. We now have 17 creatures in our deck, 17 lands, and 6 non-creature spells. That's it. That's a draft deck. Now, one of the things that you're looking for in a draft deck is having a nice mana curve. That's probably one of the most important things you can be thinking about during the draft. So rather than always picking the card that seems the most powerful, sometimes you're picking cards based on what their mana cost is. You want a nice number of 2 mana cards. You want a nice number of 3 mana cards. You want less as you go up the spectrum in mana cost, and you want less at the very bottom. Most of your cards should cost 2 or 3 mana. What that's going to do is it's going to basically ensure that you have stuff to play early in the game. You don't want to have a whole bunch of 5 mana cards and sit there for the first 5 turns playing lands, doing nothing as your opponent plays small creatures and beats you down, kills you very quickly. So we have a deck. It's going to have 9 swamps in it, 8 plains. Again, 17 lands. More of the time than not, you're going to be 2 colors. And that means that you're going to have 9 of one type of land and 8 of another. Totally fine. Usually 9 and 8 is the right amount if you have an even mix of white and black in this case. You don't want to start fiddling with this too much to where you have 10 or 7 or 11 6. That's generally ill-advised. You want to stick as close together as possible. Ideally in this deck, we want to draw 1 swamp, 1 plains, and then a bunch of any kind of land so that we can play every spell in our deck. And there we have it, our first draft deck. It's got creatures, it's got non-creatures, and it's got a nice curve.